My stepmother mocked my little party business at my sister's wedding, but she had no idea. The entire reception was secretly run by my company. Claire, my younger sister, sent me an invitation to her wedding. Yes, that Claire, the golden child, the apple of my father and stepmother's eyes, the one I hadn't spoken to since severing ties with my entire poisonous family. I mean, the audacity, right? 7 years of nothing, no calls, no texts, no, hey, how's life? And now I'm invited to this big, beautiful wedding. It wasn't only the invitation, however. A handwritten message was put inside, in Claire's distinctive handwriting. She wrote that she missed me and wanted to make things right. I stared at it for a long time, wondering whether it was a trick. So, was she serious? After everything that happened, and how they treated me, she wanted me back in the fold. Let me backtrack for context. Our mother died when I was 15 and Claire was 12. It devastated us, as you would guess. But while I was still processing my sadness, my father was out there moving on. He remarried a year later, and Denise, the stepmother from hell, moved in. From the start, she had an implicit objective to obliterate any traces of my mother. Family photos, gone. My mother's favorite decor, packed and thrown away. I was devastated. But Claire clung to Denise as if she were a savior. I could not blame her. She was only a youngster and she needed someone. But I couldn't stand Denise and the way she controlled everything. Things worsened as we grew older. By the time I started college, Dad refused to aid me financially. What's his reasoning? I needed to grow up and take responsibility. Meanwhile, he was showering Claire with everything: college tuition, a fresh new apartment, and even a car, all paid for without hesitation. I was working part-time, just scraping by, and trying to start an event planning firm from scratch. Denise, of course, regarded it as playing around, whereas Claire was the family's shining star, thriving in school, and seemingly deserving of their full support. I eventually had enough. After years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, I severed relations. No spectacular encounter, no major fallout, just silence. I stopped phoning and visiting and concentrated on improving my life. I immersed myself into my work and thrived. My business flourished beyond my wildest dreams, and I reached a point where I didn't need anyone. Not Dad, Denise, or Claire. This leads us back to the wedding invitation. At first, I considered throwing it away. Why should I care? They didn't care about me when I was fighting to get through school, save enough money for groceries, or in need of a family. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity or Claire's note. I couldn't tell if she was sincere, or if this was another one of Denise's ruses. Regardless, I chose to go. If nothing else, I felt I could come up, observe how things unfolded, and leave if things were too uncomfortable. Here's the thing. I wasn't going to go empty-handed. Despite our years of enmity, I still wanted to do something good for Claire. I offered to help her organize her wedding, giving her complete service from my company at a significant discount. She respectfully declined, stating that Denise had already taken care of everything. That stung a little, to be honest. But hey, I'd done my part. I'd extended an olive branch. The ball was in their court. So there I was, preparing for the big day. I knew coming inside that theater would reopen a lot of old wounds, but I told myself it was worth it. Perhaps Claire was sincere. Maybe this was her way of reaching out and making amends. I had low expectations, but I held out hope. The night before the wedding, I couldn't fall asleep. Memories of the past came flooding back. Holidays where I sat on the sidelines while Claire received all of the attention. Talks where Denise belittled me in front of Dad. And moments when I understood I wasn't a part of the family anymore. I persuaded myself it did not matter. I was attending the wedding for Claire, not them. And if things went wrong, I could always go. I had nothing to prove to anybody. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit, got into my car, and drove to the location. I arrived early since that is simply who I am. I'm a planner and always have been. The house was stunning. Lofty ceilings, beautiful flowers, the works. They had obviously spared no expense. As I walked through the doors, I felt a combination of nervousness and dread. This was the first time I had seen my family in nearly a decade. Will they accept me, ignore me, or tear me apart? I had no idea. Claire looked radiant when I spotted her. She approached me, hugged me, and thanked me for coming. For a while I thought, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. But then I saw Denise. She was standing to the side, observing me like a hawk. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and I could see she wasn't pleased I was present. "Welcome," she said, her voice full of phony kindness. "Still running that little party business of yours?" I gritted my teeth and grinned back. It's going well, thanks. She sneered, plainly unimpressed, and shifted her focus to someone else. Denise's style is classic. I shrugged it off and found my seat. The ceremony was lovely, I'll give them that. Claire appeared really joyful, and for a moment, I forgot about the stress. But deep down, I knew the tranquility would not last. It was my family after all. Drama was unavoidable. Walking inside the reception area, I felt a knot in my gut tighten. It wasn't the venue, because let's be honest, it was magnificent. The chandeliers glistened like something out of a magazine. The tables were arranged with fine cutlery, and I could see my reflection. The floral arrangements appeared to have come straight from paradise. No, the knot was not part of the decor, it was inevitable. This was the first time I'd seen my family in almost 7 years, and I knew what was coming. I made my way to the seating chart, scanning the list for my name. When I discovered table 14, the knot in my gut became into a sinking feeling. I didn't need a map to find where that was. Weddings follow a pattern. Immediate family sits at the prime tables, followed by close friends, extended family, then random stragglers. Table 14 was clearly in the "we don't care if you're here" zone. When I arrived, I knew the insult was not subtle. My table mates were distant relatives I scarcely remembered. Aunt Lydia, who frequently mispronounced my name and smelled like mothballs, and Uncle Roger, who spent every family meeting droning on about his coin collection. What about the other 2 people at the table? I wasn't even sure who they were. Meanwhile, I noticed Claire's friends and Denise's family gathered around the dance floor. Dad and Denise were understandably center stage, relishing in their self-proclaimed very important person position. I couldn't help but giggle at myself. This was completely on brand for them. 7 years with no touch, and they still treated me like an afterthought. Fine. I did not come here for the seating arrangement. I came for Claire, or so I told myself. I attempted to maintain my cool. I poured myself a drink of water, looked around the room, and pretended I didn't care. But then the first landmine of the evening stepped right up to my table, Dad, and he was undeniably inebriated. Now I realized it wasn't going to be a pleasant interaction. Dad's drinking isn't nice, it's loud, rude, and entirely improper. True to tradition, he smashed his hand onto the table, making Aunt Lydia jump. "What the hell are you doing here, Leonard?" he mumbled. "You weren't supposed to come." I looked at him shocked. "I got an invitation," I responded calmly. I even took it out of my pocket for verification. "Claire invited me." He snorted. "You should have stayed where you belong. You're just here to embarrass us, aren't you? Showing up with your little party business like it means something." His voice became louder, and I could feel eyes turning toward us. My face blazed with wrath and shame, but I remained silent. Before I could react, Denise was by his side, perfectly timed as always. "Leonard," she asked, her tone mockingly concerned, "do you even make enough to buy that suit, or is it rented?" She gave me a smug look, as if she'd given the punchline of the century. I glanced at her and then back at Dad, realizing there was no point. You can't argue with individuals like them, especially when they're drunk and full of themselves. So, I did the only thing I could. I stood up, adjusted my suit, and said, "Excuse me." I went away without saying another word. But I didn't rush to the door. I wanted to clear my mind first. So I went out to the patio. The cool night air made me feel like I could breathe again. But the noises from inside continued to echo in my ears. Embarrassment. Small party business. God, they couldn't even let me live without destroying me. I leaned on the railing, looking out at the garden, trying to figure out what to do next. Leave without looking back? Go back inside and pretend none of this upset you? Neither option felt appropriate. I was deep in concentration when I heard the music start playing inside, cheerful, lively, and absolutely opposite of how I felt. That's when I knew I couldn't remain. I owed these folks nothing, least of all my time and energy. I made my way back inside, staying toward the room's boundaries to avoid being observed. On my way out, I looked over at the event workers. They were preparing for the following course, arranging plates with such efficiency that I couldn't help but marvel. Something about them seemed familiar. I slowed down, watching them move, and then it hit me. I knew these folks. These were not simply any staff personnel. They were my employees. My thoughts raced. My company had recently bought a smaller event planning company, and it turned out that this wedding was one of their projects. My team did the job, so it's no surprise that the setup looked so flawless. I experienced a peculiar mix of emotions, including pride, surprise, and above all, a developing sense of irony. Claire and Denise had hired my company without even knowing it. Perhaps they were aware of the situation, but chose to ignore it. In any case, the evening's power dynamics had abruptly transformed. And for the first time all night, I felt in control. I moved to the side and took out my phone, dialing my operations manager. When she responded, I spoke quietly. "Hey, quick question," I said. "This wedding, are we running it?" There was a pause followed by, "Yeah." "Why?" I couldn't help laughing. "No reason," I said. "Just wanted to confirm." I hung up the phone and returned my attention to the room. As I stood there, still processing the reality that my team was in charge of the wedding at which I had just been humiliated, a knowledge struck me like a freight train. Everything, the flowers, the lighting, the precisely scheduled dinner service, was handled by my company. Claire and Denise had mistakenly, or perhaps consciously, hired me to make their fantasy wedding come true. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Part of me wanted to storm back inside and declare, "Hey, guess what? All of this, it's mine." But the more calculating part of me knew there was a better way to handle this. After all, Dad and Denise had gone out of their way to disrespect me, treating me as if I did not belong. If they didn't want me there, they certainly didn't deserve the efforts of my staff. I called my operations manager again, my hands trembling not from fear but from adrenaline. "Hey Kate," I said calmly. "Can you confirm the client's contract for tonight?" "Sure, Leonard," she replied, perplexed. "Why?" "I'll explain later. Just tell me, does the contract include the usual termination clause?" Kate didn't even need to look it up. "Yep. Hostile or discriminatory behavior toward staff or management gives us the right to terminate services immediately." "Bingo. Perfect," I replied, a smile spreading across my face. "We're invoking it. Start packing up." There was a pause on her end, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her brain. "Wait, what happened?" she inquired. "Let's just say the client has made it clear they don't want me, or us, here," I responded. "I'll fill you in later. Just trust me on this one." Kate did not hesitate. "Got it. I'll handle it." I hung up, my heart thumping. This was it. If Dad and Denise believed they could treat me like trash while still reaping the benefits of my labor, they were in for an unpleasant surprise. I wasn't doing this out of spite. Well, maybe a little. But because it felt right to do. I wasn't going to allow them mistreat me while benefiting from my hard work. It was not personal. It was business. Back inside, the event was in full swing. The music was playing, guests were socializing, and servers were serving the first course. On the surface, everything appeared to be in order, but I knew chaos was on its way. My staff worked like a well-oiled machine, discreetly packing equipment and supplies while maintaining appearances. Guests didn't see anything at first, which speaks to their professionalism. I remained outdoors, watching from the terrace as the plot developed. My workers started pulling down floral arrangements, rolling up tablecloths, and silently emptying up decorations. It was like witnessing a magician make an entire room disappear without anyone noticing. Denise may have been able to mock me, but she could not touch the quality of my work, or my workers. The first indicator of problems occurred when the lighting crew began disassembling the uplights in the room. A few guests saw, pointing and muttering to each other, but no one spoke out yet. Denise, of course, was too busy conducting court at her table to notice what was going on. Dad was nowhere to be found, likely nursing another drink. As more decorations removed, the whispers became louder. Finally, one of the servers approached Denise and said something to her. Her expression changed from smug to furious in a matter of seconds. She rose from her chair and marched across the room, her shoes clicking like gunshots across the marble floor. "What's going on? Why are they taking everything down?" I could hear her say from the patio. The server seemed really afraid. "I don't know, ma'am. You'll have to ask the event manager." That's when she noticed Kate, who was quietly directing the personnel. Denise stormed over, her screaming getting louder with each step. "What is this? What the hell are you doing?" Kate did not flinch. "We're following the terms of the contract, ma'am. Services are being terminated due to hostile behavior toward our management." Denise blinked. "What hostile behavior? Who even is your management?" Kate motioned toward the patio, where I stood. Denise turned, her gaze sharpening as she noticed me. I gave her a little wave and kept my demeanor as bland as possible. She stormed out, her face flushed with wrath. "You," she hissed. "You can't do this." "This is Claire's wedding, and this is my company," I responded calmly. You made it clear earlier that you don't respect me or what I do, so why would you want my services? Her jaw fell. You're doing this to punish me, to ruin Claire's wedding. I shake my head. This isn't about Claire. It's about the way you and Dad treated me. You can't humiliate me and then expect me to provide top-tier service. That's not how this works. Denise stammered, trying to come up with an answer. Kate approached me first and offered me a clipboard. We're ready to roll out, she remarked. Everything's packed? She nodded. Thanks, Kate. Great work, as always. Denise appeared to be about to burst, but I didn't stick around to find out. I handed her my lawyer's card and told her, if you have any questions about the contract, please contact our legal team. Have a great evening. I walked away, leaving her dumbfounded. The aftermath was considerably more chaotic than I expected. By the time my crew arrived, the reception hall was nearly empty. The chandeliers hung from the ceiling, but there were no flowers, tablecloths, or uplights. Guests stood about, puzzled and whispering. Claire appeared to be on the point of tears, and for a single second, I felt horrible. But then I reminded myself that this was not about her. This was about standing up for oneself. The drive home from Claire's wedding should have been enjoyable. I mean, I had just organized one of the most famous mic drops in my life. But, when the taillights of my team's trucks faded from my rearview mirror, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. This was not how I had expected the day would go. Still, I knew I had made the proper decision. For the first time in a long time, I advocated for myself. Not just as a business owner, but as a person. And, while the night did not go as planned, I was not going to let that stop me from moving forward. This was only the beginning. I didn't have much time to think about it, though, because the fallout started almost immediately. About 20 minutes into my travel, the first signs of turmoil appeared on my phone. Text messages, missed calls and voicemails poured in. Denise, understandably, led the charge with a series of heated texts. They were long and meandering, full of claims that I had spoiled everything, even Claire's big day, out of spite. Everyone was more spectacular than the last. I can't believe you did this to Claire, she said. You're a selfish, vindictive little boy who can't handle someone else being happy. You ruined this family's reputation. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Oh, she wasn't finished. The texts kept coming, each one more bizarre than the one before it. She accused me of undermining the wedding out of jealousy, called me sad, and even demanded a full refund for the occasion. Yes. Refund. She really believed I should repay her for the services my company had already rendered, as if she had some moral high ground to stand on. You've embarrassed this entire family, she went on. Do you know what people are saying about us now? I should have known better than to trust you with anything important. You are a failure, Leonard, and you always will be. The boldness was quite hilarious. I did not react, and instead silenced her phone number. She wasn't worth my time. Dad was not far behind. His voicemails were less coherent, but equally hostile. I'll spare you the details, but the phrases selfish brat and I'll sue your ass were prominent. He even threatened to call the cops at one point, which really made me laugh. What are you calling the cops for? Breaching a contract that he had no idea existed? Good luck with it. Claire sent the most shocking message, though. I had expected her to be angry, but when I finally read her text, it was not what I expected. She wrote, "Why would you do this to me? I thought you came to support me. I didn't think you'd ruin my wedding." Oof. That one hit harder than I anticipated. It wasn't like Denise's vitriol or Dad's drunken rants. This felt like genuine pain. Claire and I hadn't talked in years, but I could still sense the pain in her words. I could tell she didn't understand why I made the decision I did, and I don't blame her. Claire had always been caught in the thick of the confusion. Denise had her claws in her from an early age, and Dad was not the type of dad who fostered independent thought. Claire had grown up in the same toxic atmosphere from which I had escaped, but instead of battling it, she had adapted. I wanted to respond to her and explain my perspective, but I wasn't sure it would make a difference. For a little moment, I worried if I had made a mistake. But then I remembered why I called in the first place. The next morning the situation worsened. True to form, Denise couldn't let it go. She began phoning people, family members, acquaintances, anyone who would listen, and manipulating the narrative to her advantage. By lunchtime, I'd received texts from 2 aunts and a cousin, all asking me to explain what had happened. To avoid repeating the same thing over and over, I sent a blanket text to the few relatives I still semi-trusted. Long story short, I was humiliated, disrespected and treated like an outsider. So I terminated my company's services in accordance with the terms of the contract. If you have any questions, please ask Denise. If you want to know the truth, ask the venue workers. I am done defending myself. One of my aunts replied nearly immediately. Good for you, she wrote. We watched how Denise treated you on Thanksgiving 5 years ago. She's always been terrible to you. I am simply sorry Claire got caught in the middle. Her support caught me off guard. I'd spent so many years assuming that my entire family had abandoned me that I hadn't considered the notion that some of them might be on my side. It was a minor consolation in the midst of a hurricane. Then came the unexpected reaction from the guests. By the afternoon, I began receiving emails and queries. Business queries. Apparently, news had passed among some of the wedding guests about what had occurred, and a number of them were impressed with how my crew handled the matter. One woman, whom I dimly recognized as Claire's in-law's family friend, contacted me to express her admiration for my staff's professionalism. I heard what happened, she texted, and I just wanted to say, your team handled everything with incredible grace. It was clear the issue wasn't with your company, but with the family. I'm hosting a charity gala in a few months and would love to work with you if you're available. Talk about a silver lining, I answered right away, thanking her for her nice remarks and arranging a time to discuss the event. Within a few hours, I had 3 more similar emails from different guests. It was surreal. The same wedding I'd been accused of wrecking was now providing free attention for my business. Denise's attempts to embarrass me had failed horribly. Of course, Denise wasn't finished. By the evening, she had taken her campaign against me digital. I noticed she had written a negative review about my company online, accusing us of being unprofessional and untrustworthy. The review was full of pure lies, stating that we arrived late, offered bad service, and abandoned the event without warning. Thankfully, I was ready for this. I quickly contacted my lawyer, and within hours, we had sent Denise a cease and desist letter informing her that any additional false remarks would be considered defamatory. The review was withdrawn the next day, and as far as I know, she has not attempted to submit anything else since. Denise reportedly decided to take her entitled tantrum to new heights. The next morning, while I was going through my emails, my lawyer called me. You're going to love this one, she said, her tone tinged with irony. Claire's family is threatening to sue you for breach of contract. I actually laughed aloud. You're kidding, I replied. On what grounds? They're claiming you abandoned the event and caused irreparable damage to Claire's wedding, I said. They're demanding a full refund and additional damages for emotional distress. The stupidity of it nearly made me spit out my coffee. Emotional distress? Because I enforced a clause they agreed to? That's rich. My attorney giggled. Don't worry, Leonard. This is nothing more than a scare tactic. Their lawyer, if you can even call him that, sent a laughably vague letter with no specifics. I'll draft a response, but they don't have a leg to stand on. A few days later, Denise's lawsuit went to the next ludicrous level. Their lawyer, who I subsequently discovered was one of Dad's poker cronies, issued me another letter, saying that my choice to cease services had resulted in public humiliation and severe financial loss. He even included some inflated figures for the estimated cost of event decor and food services. What is the best part? The letter also accused me of being malicious and vindictive for removing the decorations during the event. The plaintiff's family was subjected to public embarrassment, the text reads. The abrupt removal of event services tarnished the reputation of the hosts and caused irreparable harm to their social standing. I couldn't stop giggling when reading that. Denise was sincerely attempting to portray herself as the victim in a setting she had completely contrived. The irony was so thick, it could be cut with a knife. However, my lawyer was significantly less amused. They're trying to throw mud at the wall and see what sticks, she explained on our next call. Their entire case hinges on the idea that you violated the contract, but the clause you invoked is ironclad. We'll respond formally, and I'll make it clear that pursuing this further will only waste their time and money. The legal back and forth lasted nearly 2 weeks. Denise and Dad persisted, most likely because their counsel lacked the courage to tell them they had no chance of winning. Meanwhile, my lawyer was working behind the scenes to gather all of the evidence we needed to permanently close this case. We had everything. Claire's original contract, which clearly detailed the termination provision, witness statements from my workers who were present when Denise made her unpleasant comments, and the pièce de résistance, security footage from the venue. The cameras had caught everything, even Dad's drunken outburst and Denise berating my crew. When their lawyer saw the tape, the case fell almost immediately. My lawyer sent a last letter outlining the information in great detail and informing them that if they continued to pursue the case, we will sue for defamation and legal fees. 2 days later, my lawyer emailed me to say the matter had been withdrawn. No additional action is required. The most unexpected consequence, however, came from Claire's new husband, Adam. He called me several days after the wedding. I almost didn't answer, but out of curiosity, I did. "Hey Leonard," he said with an uneasy tone. "I know Claire wants to talk to you," he said. "She feels terrible about everything, she's just, I don't know, scared. She's stuck between you and Denise and it's tearing her up." I exhaled. "I get it. But if she wants to talk, it has to come from her. I'm not going to chase her down." "I'll tell her," he said. I hung up feeling oddly hopeful. Maybe Claire and I still had a chance to fix things. Perhaps not. In any case, I had finally stood up for myself, which was a victory in my opinion. Claire texted me a few weeks after the chaos had settled. "Hello, can we meet up? I feel like we should chat." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to feel. On the one hand, there was Claire reaching out. The same Claire who had remained mute while Denise and Dad humiliated me at her wedding. The same Claire who had seen my company, which I had created from the ground up, be degraded and then walked away without saying anything. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the persistent doubt. What did she want from me now? Was this a true olive branch, or was she simply trying to smooth things over for her own benefit? Despite my better judgment, I consented to meet her. "Sure," I responded. "Let me know when and where." We met at a little cafe which I used to frequent when I was starting my business. It was neutral ground, yet I couldn't help but notice tension in the air as I went in. Claire was already there, drinking coffee. She looked up and gave an awkward forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey," she remarked, motioning for me to sit. "Hey," I said, taking a seat across from her. There was a lengthy gap before she spoke. "I'm really sorry about everything that happened at the wedding," she told us. "It got so out of hand, and I know Denise and Dad said some things they shouldn't have." I raised an eyebrow. "Some things?" She shuffled uncomfortably in her seat. "Okay, a lot of things. But you have to understand, they were stressed. Weddings are a lot of pressure, and emotions were high. It wasn't personal." I gave out a sour laugh. "Not personal, Claire?" "They called me an embarrassment. They mocked my business, belittled me, and basically told me I shouldn't have been there. How is that not personal?" She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Look, I'm not saying what they did was right, but you pulling out the way you did wasn't fair either. You ruined the reception, Leonard. People are still talking about it." There it was, the genuine reason she wanted to speak. "So this isn't about what they said or did," I stated with an icy tone. "This is about how it made you look." "That's not what I'm saying," she said hastily, but the guarded tone in her voice suggested a different story. "I just think you could have handled it differently. You didn't have to punish everyone because of what Denise and Dad said." I glanced at her, trying to figure out if she believed what she was saying, or if she was simply repeating Denise's narrative. "Punish everyone?" I repeated. "Claire, they hired my company. They insulted me. The owner, in front of everyone. They didn't even bother hiding their disdain. You expect me to just stand there and take it?" "I expected you to think about someone other than yourself," she replied. "This wasn't about you. It was my wedding. Do you know how humiliating it was when everything fell apart? People were asking me what happened, and I didn't know what to say. I had to deal with the fallout while you just walked away." I leaned back in my seat, astonished. "So that's what this is about? Not what they did. Not how they treated me. It's about how it inconvenienced you." "That's not fair," she exclaimed, her voice rising significantly. "I'm trying to fix this, but you're making it impossible." "Fix it?" I repeated. "Claire, you haven't once acknowledged what I went through. You're sitting here blaming me for standing up for myself, because it didn't fit into your perfect little wedding narrative. Do you even hear yourself?" She crossed her arms and her expression hardened. "Maybe I wouldn't have to say this if you hadn't made everything about you. I invited you to the wedding because I wanted you there. I was trying to include you. But you turned it into a disaster." I felt a strong aching in my chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. Claire was not stuck between Denise and Dad. She was exactly like them. Entitled, manipulative, and incapable of accepting responsibility for her actions. I stood up and tossed some cash on the table to cover my coffee. "You know what, Claire? I'm done. With you, with Dad, with Denise, all of it. I've spent my whole life being the scapegoat for this family, and I'm not doing it anymore. Her eyes expanded. Leonard, wait. No. I replied firmly. You don't get to rewrite this. I came to your wedding because I thought maybe things had changed. But all I got was the same disrespect I've dealt with my whole life. And now you're sitting here blaming me for having the audacity to walk away from it. I'm done, Claire, for good. She sat astonished as I walked out of the cafe. That was the last time I spoke with Claire. She sent a few texts in the days that followed, but I didn't react. There was nothing more to say. She had shown me who she truly was, and I believed her. I cut Denise and Dad totally out of my life, and it was the best move I'd ever taken. In the months that followed, my firm grew, due in part to a slew of new clients who were impressed by how skillfully my team managed the wedding disaster. Denise and Dad may have attempted to break me down, but all they did was make me stronger. And Claire? She faded into the background of my memories. I stopped worrying about whether she'd ever view things differently because it didn't matter. Family is not about blood, it's about respect,